it's the project team that afterwards then identifies issues, concerns, and challenges. They hold meetings to review and manage all of the problems as they arise. But a much more current approach, which is very creative, and it does bring about enormous change. And I know some of you are entered into this arena, is Agile. And the reason why it is so much more like driving change, but so much more creative, is because instead of working through, well, they call them sprints, instead of doing all of your detailed planning, these great long work breakdown structures and so on, they do them in 2-week sprints. So they don't have these long detailed plans. They use artifacts instead of the detailed reports that you may be developing now. They also use short-term sprint goals instead of the longer-term ones. But in their meetings, which is really interesting, they also have what they call impediments. And they do this every day where each person says, these are the things that are preventing me from being successful in what it is that I am trying to achieve. And so we can talk about how to overcome those. So it is very much a creative approach. And I know that it seems to sit, for whatever reason, just in software, but we've been working now in moving it into some product development, more manufacturing environments and so on. And it's a very interesting and an enormous change. But it is looking at more creative approaches. So here's an example. A very large U.S. manufacturer that we worked with recently. #1 in the marketplace. Very, very successful. Not paying a great deal of attention. All of a sudden, they fell to #2. They lost track of where they were, and they suddenly fell to #3. And so the executive said, you know what? If we develop this one new product, we're sure we can recapture the entire marketplace, and it's going to bring us back to the #1 position. So they put a large program team together, threw lots of money at it, and so on. And after a year, they were in such a crisis that we were asked to go in there and do an in-depth audit on it to find out the root causes of all of the problems. So we went in, did the audit, and then they wanted some assistance in implementing the recommendations. And I'm sure that all of you could probably not be surprised by most of the audit findings. But one thing we did notice: no creativity. They were way too involved in managing crisis situations, fighting fires, and so on. So there was no innovation, no creativity going on. So I went back and I thought about this one quote from Albert Einstein. And it had to do with asking questions. So Albert Einstein said this. He said, creativity begins by asking questions. Innovation starts to happen when we ask more questions. So the more questions you have, the better answers you have. If there are no questions, well, then there are no answers. So start to ask questions, lots of questions. So I brought the entire program team together. I put them together for 5 days, and the first thing I did is I went into this and I said, okay, we're going to ask questions. So I started to ask them questions, some of them a little uncomfortable, but that's part of the creative process. So I said to them this: what really bothers you about this program? Well, that's not a question anyone had really asked them before. Now, these questions I had asked on a one-on-one basis, but I had never shared my report with all of them, just the program managers, so they were not familiar with what other people had said. Now I wanted them to do it as a team. So it creates a bit of discomfort, but through the discomfort we get more creative juices going. I asked them, what do you see as some of the opportunities? Now that was an easy one. They came up with lots of stuff and so on. And then I asked them, why can't this program be completed within its constraints? What are the issues, concerns, and challenges? And then I hit them with this one. What are you, each of you, doing that's actually helping or hindering the ability of this program to be successful? And they paused, and nobody wrote anything down. And I sat there, and I waited. You know, right now we're involved in doing our 3rd groundbreaking research study on PMOs and ePMOs, and the one thing that I know about asking questions is you must always ask a question and pause. When people do not respond, we think, oh, maybe we weren't all that clear, and so we repeat it, we clarify it, and so on. Don't. Wait. It is that pregnant pause, the uncomfortable feeling that eventually stuff starts to come out. And they started to do it. Now, names were unimportant. It really didn't matter who said what. We had all of this stuff out there. Then we could start to group it together, come up with the solutions. And so they started to own the solutions to it. Didn't worry so much about the fact that the entire program was off track, because quite frankly, it was off track, what's another week, and so on. And they came up with that. And so then what that team did, and here's a picture of them, is they realized that the most important thing, the most innovative thing, was not to continue, but to stop. To actually stop, put the foundation back in, because they recognized that actually they really never did agree on scope or plan. It was all done the traditional way, not a creative way. The program manager said, here's the scope, here's the plan, this is what I want you to do. They all worked in silos. Manufacturing did their thing, engineering did their thing, IT did their thing, but they did not work together. It was amazing, and they're totally back on track now, but they owned it. So one thing that you want to do is make sure that the team owns the project, not the project manager. You should just kind of facilitate, oversee, and so on. So the one thing that we know when it comes to innovation is that it's a collaborative process. It's a collaborative process where people come together and they challenge the status quo. And absolutely, it's not about an individual. As a matter of fact, when we think of Thomas Edison, in his lifetime, over 1,093 amazing inventions, and we think, oh my God, what a genius. Well, he was, okay. But you know, he just used that 1% inspiration. Then what he did is he had the Menlo Park Laboratory team. And he brought them together. He gave them all of this. And they used innovation, because it is a process to go through, and project management. So the combination of those two is what allowed them to take his great ideas and move them from vision to reality. So that's what we want to start to do in our projects. So how can we create more innovative thinking in your projects? Let me give you some ideas. One of them is this: stand in different places. If you're a project manager, and I know many of you are, become a team member. And don't say, oh, well, I did it because. There's no need to justify, to clarify, or anything else. Actually be a team member and see what it's like from their perspective. Try to become a business analyst. Try to be a customer. See things from their perspective. Step inside their shoes and park all of your concerns, your issues, and the things that you desperately want to say. The challenge for you is to think by understanding things from their perspective, the way they see things and why they react to certain comments, questions, and reports that you provide to them. If the CEO is not receptive to a report, to a communication, or to a great idea for a new project, then reframe it. What if you had to sell it to a teenager? What if you had to give that report, that communication to a teenager? How would they receive it? Would they think, oh my God, there's so much detail, what do you want me to do with it? Because honestly, if you can't sell it to a teenager, you got to reframe it for the CEO. Ask powerful questions. So this comes back to Thomas Edison, absolutely. You want to ask all kinds of questions. No such thing as a silly question. Part of the creativity is to ask ridiculous questions, off-the-wall questions. Don't be afraid to ask any of them. Start with the why, the what, the how, the when, the what ifs, and so on. And then reverse the question. So that's the example I gave with the CEO. Reverse it by asking, what if it was a teenager? Now here's an interesting one. Ask the real question. So rather than saying, why are we having challenges on this project, say, what could we do to make it worse? What could we do to totally sabotage this program? To totally undermine this project? Because what you'll find is they'll come up with all kinds of weird and crazy stuff. They're going to say the real stuff too, and then brainstorm on how do we overcome all of those, and you'll find that those particular solutions will actually help the current situation in your project. Create a visual verbal journal. Create a journal of your thoughts. You know what it's like. You wake up in the morning, you have these great ideas. When you're driving down the highway in your car or whatever, I know you can't pull out paper then and write them down, but you know, we have great ideas at very moments of quiet. Get all those things written down. Doodle. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but in a meeting, if there is somebody doodling, our tendency is to stop them. Oh, we think that they're not listening. But you know, if you stop a doodler from doodling, that they'll stop listening. So allow them to do both. Try the doodling yourself. You will be surprised at how it will start to generate some creative ideas for you. And write down all of your key ideas. Now, the creating drawings of your processes. we're so linear. I mean, procedures are all written down and so on. Many organizations are moving to flowcharts, where all of the procedures are documented in detailed flowcharts. So I can click on any element in it, it drops down to the next level, the next level. I can see where my work came from, where it's going to. I can see the decision points, the approval levels, and so on in it. And so by moving to something more visible, again, it's far more creative. And then describe the actions and the thoughts of your customers when you played the role of what it's like to be a customer. Find out, spend some time with them. Change the pace of attention. So you've decided to bring your team together. You're going to do some brainstorming. The research that's occurred over the past 3-4 years clearly indicates the worst thing you can do is bring your team together for brainstorming. It is absolutely the wrong time. If you've got a challenging question for them, whatever it is, give them the question, say, tomorrow we're going to meet. I want you to brainstorm out all of your ideas. What the research has shown is that people need quiet time. That's why when we get up in the middle of the night and we've got to write things down because our mind was working. Some of you are better at night over a glass of wine. When you first get out of the shower, it doesn't really matter. Then have them come in with the ideas. You'll find that you will have much more robust discussion. Now that you've got all these ideas, work with the team to brainstorm additional ideas. Rank them. Now you know what's going to happen. The high, medium, and low. The high ones are going to be the ones that are easy to implement, the more obvious ones and so on. They come out high. But here's something different. Ask them to brainstorm additional items for the low-ranked ones. Because those are the ones that maybe it's a higher risk, but boy, if we could put them into play, wouldn't it make a huge and dramatic difference? So get them to do that, and you'll find that some of the low-ranked items will start to rise up to the top. And then leave the room. Go for a walk. Not leave the room so everybody can catch up on all of their cell phones and the texts and the messages and everything else, but to just leave the room. And the worst thing is, I know we're all so concerned, but what if somebody sends me an email? Yeah, so what do you think is going to happen? Honestly, I remember the CEO of this large pharmaceutical company, Baxter, I was working with, and he literally said to all of them, if it is so important that you must respond to it, then you shouldn't really be in the meeting. Because quite honestly, unless your house burned down or some medical emergency happened in your family, what possibly could there be that would require you to respond to any of those emails and texts? So we really have to change our thinking in that. It interferes with our creativity because it changes our focus. Franklin Roosevelt. He said, people acting together as a group can accomplish things no individual could ever hope to bring about. Innovation is a team approach, working together collectively. It's not about the individual. So innovation in your projects, teams create success, not individuals. Lots of questions, ask lots of questions, and move from the traditional to the more creative in the management of all of your projects, and you'll start to see the creativity coming out and the innovation starting to happen. And thank you.